back to episode number 2. We're moving in today to looking at specific microphones, and the purpose of today is to look at the AKG 414. This particular version is the XLS, and we've got it next order our SM7B, which we're going to use at the start of all these episodes. So at the moment you're hearing me on the SM7B, and we're now going to switch for the rest of this, and there's no tricks this time, we're now going to switch just to the AKG 414. Right, there we go. So now we're on the AKG 414. As you can see, it's a quite chunky microphone if you've never seen one of these before. Large diaphragm, needs 48 volts phantom power. Moderately expensive, I guess. Actually, yeah, it cost a lot of money. But moderately expensive in microphone terms. If we move away from cardioid, we've got omnidirectional polar patterns. That is to say, the microphone will pick up equally well anywhere around it. Now, it's not just in a circle that way, it's also in a circle that way. In truth, there is a little bit of a null where the microphone connector goes in, because realistically, it's in the way of sound. So anything coming from that direction is reduced a little tiny bit, but not a great deal. To all intents and purposes, an omnidirectional microphone picks up equally well anywhere. Now that works for you, and it also works against you. If you're trying to record something in a church or outside, then the wanted source, if you like, the signal, can often get masked by the noise, which in these cases would be cars, traffic, birds, aircraft, or if you're indoors in a church, the general hubbub that you hear in a church, people whispering, people walking, all the little tiny noises that rattle around inside a church. So an omnidirectional microphone in a really lovely cathedral might sound wonderful on a violin. If you tried to actually record someone speaking, then you have a real problem understanding it. I mean, probably most of us have been to weddings in big churches where there's a guy at the front doing the service. You can't understand a word he says because it rattles around. The reverberation of music that's so beautiful on music is absolutely awful on speech. So a cardioid microphone that focuses that forwards can be a real boon. Cardioid, omnidirectional. There's another common one. If you have a ribbon microphone, then you'll probably be very familiar with the concept of a figure of 8 pattern. It picks up in front, it picks up behind, but it doesn't pick up very well at the sides. So you could use those for all sorts of interesting things. Back in the history of broadcasting, certainly in the UK, it was quite possible to put one ribbon microphone in the middle of a table with 2 interviewees either side, and you got absolutely perfect pickup. Sitting at the sides could be some assistance with scripts, paperwork, and the possibility of making lots of noise. And because they're in the nulls, they're reduced. So a figure of 8 pattern can be used for 2 people at once. I think in recording, we don't do that very often, but if you've got 2 musicians playing together, there's no reason why a ribbon microphone couldn't be used to record 2 people. All you'd have to do is move it towards the quieter one, and then with probably a pair of headphones on, you could adjust the relative volume, and you could get a nice recording of 2 people with just one microphone. And facing each other is really good for musicians. They like to be able to see each other. It helps no end. So we've got cardioid, omnidirectional, and then we've got figure of 8. So we've got figure of 8, omnidirectional, and we've got cardioid. But there are others in between those patterns. The AKG 414 has got an extra couple of patterns built in. There is a hypercardioid, so if you like, it's the cardioid pattern, but a little bit narrower. And then we've also got one that goes in between a cardioid and the figure of 8. So you get more to the front, but you do get a little bit of pickup at the back. It uses the 2 elements of the capsule, one to do that way, and then the other at a reduced level the other way. So you can have an adjustment of your pickup capture area. So with the pickup pattern of these microphones on that setting, you can have most of your capture coming from the front, but if you want it, you can have quite a bit coming from the rear. So you can adjust things to cope with the environment in which the microphone is operating. So on here, there's 5. AKG did do a version of this microphone where you can even go halfway between each one of those. So you can increase the pattern availability even more. Realistically, this microphone sits on cardioid for most of the time. Occasionally, I'll use it on hyper if I'm trying to pick something out of a slightly busier area. But I use figure of 8 very rarely. Omni, occasionally. Remember that if you've got a pair of these, then all sorts of stereo possibilities open up to you. One of the most common ones, and I think it's probably more a British technique that was popular than it was an American one, is joining 2 microphones that are set to figure of 8, and you put them at 90 degrees to each other. So one microphone has got front and back, the other microphone has got that way and that way, and then rotate them round, and you get really a nice pickup in front of the microphone, but you also get the same quantity of pickup, if you like, at the back. So if you are in a nice space, you can really record that well. Alan Blumlin, who invented that, well, some might say developed it, but I like to think he was the inventor. It was a pretty clever thing to do, just mix 2 figure of 8 mics together and then discover that the actual accuracy of where things are when you're using headphones or loudspeakers actually works really, really well. I use it often for choirs, for small orchestras. We've got lots of churches in the UK. And if the acoustics of the place are wonderful, then using it in figure of 8 in a crossed pair in the Blumlin pattern works quite nicely. It doesn't work very well at all in things like theatres. I work quite a lot with video in theatres, and a couple of times I actually tried that, and the problem is the audience is just too loud. And okay, you can live with people clapping, and it sounds wonderful, stereo clapping, but the trouble is nowadays the audiences whoop and cheer and eat sweets and all that sort of stuff, and even crisps. So you really need to not use that technique in a theatre. As a stereo spectacular effect, it's wonderful, but it's damn distracting. So it's got, recording a concert in a theatre with people making noises. Blumlin's not a particularly useful technique to use for that. So the AKG C414. It's quite a bright microphone. I do quite like them. The one thing about them is they are quite heavy. They look fairly small, but they are quite heavy. The modern ones come in this rather neat isolation mount. I quite like that compared with the old ones. They are a little bit sensitive to stand noises. So if you've got them in a non-isolation mount and it's on anything other than a concrete floor, you can get noises from the floor come up and you can actually hear people walking and things like that. These isolation mounts are pretty decent, and they don't take up too much space. They're sort of big wiry spider type mounts. So the elastics in them are hidden, the microphone recesses in, and then it's got a really neat twist on the bottom to lock the microphone in. And it sort of will clamp other microphones apart from a 414. You can often squeeze a few others in, but that's the basic thing. AKG 414, large diaphragm condenser. On this particular one, the XLS version, we've got 5 patterns. We can switch between them just by prodding a button. And the nice bit is it does remember them, even though it's powered by the 48 volt phantom power. When you disconnect them and plug them back in, say a couple of days, 3 weeks later, it's usually still on the same setting. So it does remember the pattern, which is handy. If you're going to buy one, shop around. They do vary in price tremendously, and there are a number of different versions. Some have got transformers, some don't have. I'm not totally convinced I can hear the difference. I bought a pair of these XLSs. They've they're my go-to microphone if I want a condenser. The SM57 is my go-to microphone for a dynamic, but I do like these AKG 414s. I don't think I've put it away very often. It's usually in my studios on the stand. Other microphones tend to live in their boxes or in a case. The 414 very rarely gets put away. Because we've got two studios, I've got one each at the moment, so I can flip-flop between the two studios. So that's a brief run through of the AKG 414. Solidly recommended microphone. I really like it. I would be very happy to keep that one and give most of my others away if I really had to. The 414 really does the job. There you go. If this has been a useful video, then feel free, press the subscribe button. That's what everybody tells you to do. So do that, and then every time we release a new video, you'll get a notification. See you in the next video. We're going to do the Neumann TLM 103, I think. That'll be the next one up. Take care. Look after yourselves. Bye.